Huck Doe, identified as Eric Cupo. I originally covered this case recently as an unidentified Doe. That case was suggested by Laura W. Huck Doe was found in Santa Cruz, California. I decided it would be best to just play the old video first. It's complicated and those who did this are in jail, and my original video explained all of this. So I'll run that video first, and then I will follow up with an update on his identification. Unidentified Doe, Eric Doe, also known as Huck, located in Boulder, Colorado. On December 27, 1998, in a remote location in Boulder Creek, California, remains were located on a remote mountain. In a case like this, we're usually talking about remains that had been there for a long time before somebody found them. But in this case, it was pretty quick. He'd only been there maybe 3 to 8 weeks. They believe he was 16 to 25 and around 5'6" to 5'8". If he was indeed 16 to 25 in 1998, this would mean his date of birth was possibly from 1973 to 1982. His hair was cut short and he had a 5-inch ponytail in the back with beads woven into it. Unfortunately, enough time had gone by that he wasn't recognizable. They also noted he'd been beaten pretty badly, so they may not have been able to recognize him anyway. Someone had also stabbed him. It was noted he had opiates in his system. 1 year and 1 month later, in January of 1999, a tip came into the police from a young man. He said that a truck driver had picked him up and kept him chained inside the truck, a victim of SA. While he used the alias of Jeremy Coleman, this is where it gets a little convoluted because he appears to have suggested that he had abused himself another unnamed victim. So a victim victimized somebody else, essentially. Both were arrested, the truck driver and the man using the alias of Jeremy Coleman. The young man would eventually be identified as Jeremy Towner. Evidence was found in the man's home tying him to the death. Towner would be sentenced to life in prison in September 2021 for our John Doe's death. It came out that between November 10th to 15th, 1998, Towner drove himself, the victim, and the victim's girlfriend, whose name was Anna, to his friend Kimberly Labore's cabin. He had another friend, James Dotson, who was already there. Towner had gone there under the guise of picking up some of his belongings from the cabin. Towner knew the victim and his girlfriend, and the two had been hanging out in a group where most of the people were homeless. They knew him in that group as Huck, but they think his real name may have been Eric. Eric may have been from Florida as well. He was a drug user at the time of his death. They also believe he was homeless. Anna, along with a man named Mitch Russell, went to bed. It was then that they chose to take Huck's life. When Russell woke up, he was told Eric Doe had left. However, when they got back to town, Towner started bragging to Russell about how he and his friends had taken Eric's life. Labore and Dotson became concerned not out of guilt for what they'd done, but concern about getting caught. But it turns out that Towner had a big mouth, and they were concerned. They went on to threaten Towner and Russell, telling them to keep quiet. During his trial, Towner reportedly cried, "Man, I didn't want this guy to die." However, after his sentencing, he addressed the prosecutor, telling her, "I hope you feel satisfied. You just booked the wrong kid. I know it looks good for you to get all these convictions in the interest of justice and all that crap." What's important about the details surrounding the case is no one knows for sure how they knew Huck. Joseph Trigal is the truck driver that was holding Towner captive in his truck. Trigal was a bad guy and he was on death row in 1971 when he was 23 for taking a life before. But then the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional and they let the guy out. And of course, he was free to hurt others once again. And he did. I'm skipping through some of the details because I am much more interested in the Doe, and at the same time, I don't want to leave out anything that might help identify him. No matter what Trigal did to Towner, it doesn't excuse what Towner did to Eric or Huck Doe. The people in this case are pretty awful. For instance, Kimberly Labore and James Dotson did not just take the life of our John Doe. They also took the life of Gaylord Chilcote, and he also deserves recognition because he mattered too. What I find really annoying and upsetting is Kimberly Labor claims it's not her fault that these men lost their lives. It was her addiction and she had no choice. Governor Jerry Brown actually bought into this and reduced her sentence from 60 years down to 20. She came up for parole in 2019, and his niece said, "I am scared, not only for myself and my family, but for my community. It's really horrifying that someone who murdered 2 people could go free." Thankfully, she was denied parole. I tried to confirm Dotson was still in prison, but if he is, I couldn't find him. He was supposed to be serving life without parole in a high desert state prison. So just to reiterate, this man would have gone missing around 1998. He was around 5'6" to 5'8", and likely 16 to 25 years old, which means his date of birth was 1973 to 1982. And while he was found in Boulder, Colorado, it's not clear how long he'd been there, or how he met up with the people who took his life. Eric Doe, also known as Huck, has gone unidentified for 23 years. The Sheriff's Office Forensic Service team partnered with the California Department of Justice, NamUs, and the FBI's Latent Print Unit. They were able to use the young man's DNA to research his history on public databases. But it was a harder case. It turns out that Eric, who was 22 when his life was taken, was adopted. There have been a few of these Does like that. I'm impressed they're able to actually locate the adopted family, because the DNA doesn't directly point to them. Thankfully, they were able to trace the life of Eric as best they could, with the sheriff notifying both his biological and adopted family in March of 2023, telling them what had happened to Eric, who was 22 in December of 1998 when his life was taken. Eric was adopted by a family in Philadelphia as a small child. As an adult, he is described as living a transient lifestyle, saying he returned to his adopted family for a time when he was 18, which seems to indicate he originally ran away as a teen. However, another article says he left home at 18, so I'm not really clear on exactly what the truth is. But it does build a general picture. A third article is probably more accurate, and it said that Eric's adopted parents divorced, and he moved with his father from Pennsylvania to Florida. So my personal guess is that he went to live with his mom in Philadelphia at 18, but had been living with his father prior in Florida. But that's just my own guess. It's not positively clear that Eric was involved with drugs, but there's reason to believe that he was. It's not known whether or not there was even a woman named Anna, who was his girlfriend in the story told by those who took his life. So whether he had a girlfriend and her name was Anna and she disappeared is unknown. My personal concern, and probably that of everyone else, is that there might possibly be another victim, one that just wasn't found. Of course, it's just as likely the people involved made up Anna's existence. One thing we know now that they said that was true, however, that Eric actually was his name. So it's entirely possible that Anna existed and was herself a victim. It is known that Eric traveled to the beat of his own drum, moving frequently throughout the United States, and it was during these travels that he stopped contacting his family. It suggested he was possibly involved regularly using drugs. When he was found, he did have opiates in his system. After leaving Philadelphia, Eric is believed to have lived in Arizona and Ohio, if not more locations, before ending up in California, where those individuals took his life, all in order to steal a weapon he was selling. As for those responsible, Kimberly Labor is now 51, and she is still located in the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. Her sentence was, of course, reduced by Governor Jerry Brown, and she's been eligible for parole since 2017. That parole, however, has so far been denied. It was last denied in 2021, and this means she cannot ask for parole again until 2026. James Dotson is now 50, and he resides at the Mule Creek State Prison in Sacramento. He's serving life without the possibility of parole. Jeremy Towner is now 41, and he's serving 22 to life. He isn't currently eligible for parole until 2042. However, there's a petition to lower his sentence, as he was 16 when he was tried as an adult. Eric Cupo has gone unidentified for 24 years. Had he lived, he would be 46 years old today. Thank you everyone so much for watching and listening. If you aren't subscribed, please take a moment to do so, hitting the bell so you are notified of new videos. And thank you all for leaving comments and emojis to help with engagement. It all pushes the channel to get suggested to new people, and I appreciate that so much. Take care of yourselves and each other.